Hello, fifth graders. I'm here again with the book Tuck Everlasting, and today I am going to be reading chapter 5. So in chapter 5, you again get to meet a very important character. And I will get started. Chapter 5. Winnie awoke early the next morning. The sun was only just opening its own eye on the eastern horizon, and the cottage was full of silence. But she realized that sometime during the night she had made up her mind. She would not run away today. Where would I go anyway? She asked herself. There's nowhere else I really want to be. But in another part of her head, the dark part where her oldest fears were housed, she knew there was another sort of reason for staying at home. She was afraid to go away alone. It was one thing to talk about being by yourself and doing important things, but quite another when the opportunity arose. The characters and the stories that she read always seemed to go off without a thought or a care. But in real life, well, the world was a dangerous place. People were always telling her so. And she would not be able to manage without protection. They were always telling her that too. No one ever said precisely what it was that she would not be able to manage, but she didn't need to ask. Her own imagination supplied all the horrors. Still, it was galling, this having to admit that she was afraid. And when she remembered the toad, she felt even more disheartened. What if the toad should be out by the fence again today? What if he should laugh at her secretly and think that she was a coward? Well, anyway, she could at least slip out right now, she decided, and go into the woods to see if she could discover what had really made the music the night before. That would be something anyway. She did not allow herself to consider the idea that making a difference in the world might require a bolder venture. She merely told herself consolingly, well, of course, while I'm in the woods, if I decide never to come back, well, then that will be that. She was able to believe in this because she needed to, and believing was her own true promising friend once more. It was another heavy morning, already hot and breathless. But in the woods, the air was cooler and smelled agreeably damp. Winnie had been no more than 2 slow minutes walking timidly under the interlacing branches when she wondered why she had never come here before. Why, it's nice, she thought with great surprise. For the woods was full of light, entirely different from the light that she was used to. It was green and amber and alive, quivering in splotches on the padded ground, fanning into sturdy stripes between the tree trunks. There were little flowers that she did not recognize, white and palest blue, and endless tangled vines, and here and there a fallen log, half rotted, but soft with patches of sweet green velvet moss. And there were creatures everywhere. The air hummed with their daybreak activity, beetles and birds and squirrels and ants, and countless other things unseen, all gentle and self-absorbed and not in the least bit alarming. There was even, she saw with satisfaction, the toad. It was squatting on a low stump, and she might not have noticed it, for it looked like a mushroom than a living creature sitting there. As she came upon it, however, it blinked, and the movement gave it away. "See," she exclaimed, "I told you I'd be here first thing in the morning." The toad blinked again and nodded. Or perhaps it was only swallowing a fly. But then it nudged itself off the edge of the stump and vanished into the underbrush. "It must have been watching for me," said Winnie to herself, and she was very glad that she had come. She wandered for a long time, looking at everything, listening to everything, proud to forget the tight, pruned world outside, humming a little bit now, trying to remember that pattern of the melody that she had heard the night before. But then, up ahead, in a place where the light seemed brighter and the ground somewhat more open, something moved. Winnie stopped abruptly and crouched down. If it's really elves, she thought, I can have a look at them. And though her instinct was to turn and run, she was pleased to discover that her own curiosity was stronger. She began to creep forward. She would just get close enough, she told herself. Just close enough to see. And then she would turn and run. But when she came up near, up behind a sheltering tree trunk, and peered around it, her mouth dropped open, and all thought of running away melted away. There was a clearing directly in front of her, at the center of which an enormous tree thrust upward. Its thick roots rumpled the ground 10 feet around in every direction. And sitting relaxed, with his back against the trunk, was a boy, almost a man. And he seemed so glorious to Winnie that she lost her heart at once. He was thin and sunburned, this wonderful boy, with a thick mop of curly brown hair, and he wore his battered trousers and loose grubby shirt with as much self-assurance as if they were silk and satin. A pair of green suspenders, more decorative than useful, gave the finishing touch, for he was shoeless, and there was a twig tucked between the toes of his one foot. He waved the twig idly as he sat there, his face turned up to gaze at the branches far above him. The golden morning light seemed to glow all around him, while brighter patches fell now on his lean brown hands, then on his hair and face, as the leaves stirred above his head. Then he rubbed an ear carelessly, yawned and stretched. Shifting his position, he turned his attention to a little pile of pebbles next to him. As Winnie watched, barely breathing, he moved the pile carefully to one side, pebble by pebble. Beneath the pile, the ground was shiny wet. The boy lifted one final stone, and Winnie saw a low spurt of water arching up and returning, like a fountain, into the ground. He bent down and put his lips to the spurt, drinking noiselessly, and then he sat up again and drew his shirt sleeve across his mouth. And as he did this, he turned his face in her direction, and their eyes met. For a long moment, they looked at each other in silence. The boy, with his arms still raised up to his mouth, neither of them moved. At last, his arm fell to his side. "You may as well come out," he said with a frown. Winnie stood up, embarrassed, and because of that, a little resentful. "I didn't mean to watch you," she protested as she stepped into the clearing. "I didn't know anyone would be here." The boy eyed her as she came forward. "What are you doing here?" he asked her sternly. "It's my woods," said Winnie, surprised by the question. "I can come here whenever I want to. Well, at least, I was never here before, but I could have come anytime." "Oh," said the boy, relaxing a little. "You're one of the Fosters, then." "I'm Winnie," she said. "Who are you?" "I'm Jessie Tuck," he answered. "How do?" And he put out a hand. Winnie shook his hand, staring at him. He was even more beautiful up close. "Do you live nearby?" she managed at last, letting go of his hand reluctantly. "I never saw you before. Do you come here a lot?" "No one's supposed to. It's our woods." But then she added quickly, "Well, it's all right, though, if you come here. I mean, it's all right with me." The boy grinned. "No, I don't live nearby, and no, I don't come here often. Just passing through, and thanks. I'm glad it's all right with you. That's good, said Winnie irrelevantly. She stepped back and sat down primly a short distance from him. How old are you anyway? She asked, squinting at him. There was a pause, and at last he said, Why do you want to know? I just wondered, said Winnie. All right, I'm 104 years old, he told her solemnly. No, I mean really, she persisted. Well then, he said, if you must know, I'm 17. 17? That's right. Oh, said Winnie hopelessly. 17. That's old. You have no idea, he agreed with a nod. Winnie had the feeling that he was laughing at her, but she decided it was a nice kind of laughing. Are you married? She asked next. This time, he laughed out loud. Ha! No, I'm not married. Are you? Now it was Winnie's turn to laugh. Of course not, she said. I'm only 10, but I'll be 11 pretty soon. And then you'll get married? He suggested. Winnie laughed again, her head tilted to one side, admiring him. And then she pointed to the spurt of water. Is that good to drink? She asked. I'm thirsty. Jessie Tuck's face was instantly serious. That. No, it's not, he said quickly. You mustn't drink from it. Comes right up out of the ground, probably pretty dirty. And he began to pile the pebbles over it again. But you drank some, Winnie reminded him. Did you see that? He looked at her anxiously. Well, me? I'll drink anything. I mean, I'm used to it. It wouldn't be good for you, though. Why not? Said Winnie, and she stood up. It's mine, anyway, if it's in the woods. I want some. I'm about dry as dust. And she went to where he sat and knelt down beside the pile of pebbles. Believe me, Winnie Foster, said Jessie, it would be terrible for you if you drank any of this water. Just terrible. I can't let you. Well, I still don't see why not, said Winnie plaintively. I'm getting thirstier every minute. If it didn't hurt you, it won't hurt me. If my papa was here, he'd let me have some. You're not gonna tell him about it, are you? Said Jessie. His face had gone very pale under its sunburn. He stood up and put a bare foot firmly on the pile of pebbles. I knew this would happen sooner or later. Now what am I gonna do? And as he said this, there was a crashing sound among the trees, and then a voice called out, Jessie! Thank goodness, said Jessie, blowing out his cheeks in relief. Here comes Ma and Miles. They'll know what to do. And sure enough, a big, comfortable-looking woman appeared, leading a fat old horse, and at her side was another young man, almost as beautiful as Jessie. It was May Tuck, and her other son, Jessie's older brother. And at once, when May saw the two of them, Jessie with his foot on the pile of pebbles, and Winnie on her knees beside him, May seemed to understand. Her hand flew up to her chest and grasped at the old brooch that fastened her shawl, and her face went bleak. Well, boys, she said, here it is. The worst is happening at last. Okay, so that is chapter 5. You have now met Jessie Tuck. Jessie Tuck is May Tuck's younger son. She and her husband have 2 sons, Miles and Jessie. They're a couple of years apart from each other, but you know that Jessie Tuck is 17 years old, and you obviously just met him in this chapter. Winnie seems to have a little bit of a crush going on right away. You can kind of see that in the words and the way that it was described. I do have one question for you for after chapter 5, and that is, why do you think that Jessie wouldn't let Winnie drink from this little fountain coming out of the ground that he actually drank water out of? Why do you think he doesn't want her to drink from this little spring? Something to think about. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thanks for listening.